Hey, good morning, everyone. We are just about ready to kick off our demo. Thank you very much for joining us for the first real public reveal of Greenlight. We announced it and talked about it a little bit at PSS a few months ago. If you're not familiar, my name is Matt Harriman. I'm the CEO of Pod2. With me today, I've got Josh Groves. He's our CTO, and then the real star of the show is Barry Bosey. He's the product manager over Greenlight and is also an advisor to a lot of our customers regarding Planner and other things that we do. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to share just a couple of slides and a couple of thoughts about why we created the tool and where it came from and the scope of it. I'm not going to yap for too long, and we'll dive into the demo pretty quickly. As we go, anybody, if you want to, you can type in questions in the chat that you have. We'll do the Q&A, more at the end, but if there's any that pop up that would be good for us to go ahead and answer kind of midway through the demo or through the time, then we'll go ahead and do that also. So why did we create this tool? There's a whole lot of reasons, and we'll get into those here in a little bit. So first, I want to introduce kind of a little bit of Pod2 tech and what we do. So we create tools when we're convinced that they're really, really needed in the industry, and when we're convinced that we're the best people to do it. So the first tool that we created was the validator. This QC's Aries forecasts, which is generally not a fun time. It makes it faster. It doesn't make it any more fun, but it's faster. The planner, most people I think are going to be familiar with. It's kind of our core product right now in the scheduling and field development planning space. And then what we'll be spending our time on today is Greenlight. So Greenlight is really about the pre-spud workflow. So you might call it well readiness. There's a whole lot of names for this process of managing all the millions of things that need to happen in order to prepare for development of some kind or some kind of operational activity. It could be drilling, could be P&A, it could be all sorts of different things. The most common one, for upstream is going to be pre-spud well readiness. So a simple version of a sample pre-spud process looks something like this. There's usually stages across the top, release to stake, release to build, release to drill, etc. You've got a whole pile of things that need to be done with a whole pile of different, interesting relationships to each other. Some have to go one after the other. Some can go side by side. Some have clear and obvious timelines to them. Some don't. But all of these tasks are spread across a bunch of different functions within the asset team, right? From land, regulatory, to drilling, to completions, to facilities, all of these folks. There's a whole pile of stuff that has to happen in order for drilling to be ready to go. This tool is focused on making all of this happen faster and smoother. So everybody has some process that looks something like this, and most people solve it with something that looks like this. A conditionally formatted Excel sheet, just like everybody does for everything in this industry for the most part. It starts here. And so you've got your green, yellow, red statuses. Maybe you have timelines on things. You have different jobs that need to be done for different types of wells, different types of in different areas, in different business units, could be different sets of checklists and all of those things. So as we talked to over 80 different companies over the last couple of years, we decided, we gathered requirements from all of those companies. We tried to understand this problem really deeply. We've been familiar with it for a while. Almost all of our planner customers would ask us, okay, what do we do for pre-spud, for well readiness? And there are some things that are in the planner that help make some of that easier, but this is a different problem, right? There's a whole lot more people that need to be involved. It's much more of a workflow management problem than a planning and decision-making problem. They're very related, of course. But when we get down to it, the purpose of a pre-spud process. That's where we always like to start when we try to solve a problem of one type or another. Is like, what is the purpose here, like at the true core? And you could say it's a couple of things: to efficiently manage the prereqs to drilling, to effectively enable cross-department collaboration. Like, yes, both of these things are true, but also no. The true process, or the true purpose of a pre-spud process, is to not screw up the drill schedule. In theory, you would have your optimal development program designed. The order of wells and pads and everything is, from an economic prioritization, is already there. And then the pre-spud should just maximize your flexibility in that and your ability to deliver the most economic development plan possible. And so, yes, within this, there will be times where you pull up, you identify other opportunities that, will give you some more flexibility to preserve things. But the real idea of, the purpose of this is to make sure that the drill schedule happens the way that you want it to. So there's a whole lot more that we'll get into, and I could yap for a real long time, but we like to jump pretty quickly into the demo. Like I said, when you join, anybody else that joins, go ahead and say hi, and share why you're here. And any questions or comments or anything that you have, go ahead and throw them into the chat, and we'll get to them, either during or after the demo. And with that, I'll hand it to Barry.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. So as Matt mentioned, we really started to look at what is the best way to solve this problem. What we saw was people go and use tools like Planner for planning. And then as they start this process, they spend time sitting in meetings, checking off boxes, really just updating statuses, right? Burning G&A, trying to figure out, are all of these things done so that we can get this well to drill. And really, what you don't want at the end of the day is a situation where your rig shows up or your rig is ready to go and you're not going to be able to get that. You don't have all of the pieces to get that rig, going. So the well is not ready, but the rig is ready. And so you then, the rig's sitting, waiting 2-3 days and just costing you money. And so what we wanted to do was, is there a better way to do this? And we think there is, and that answer is Greenlight. And so what you have here is really a workflow tool. So right here, you're seeing a list of cards. This view has 3 different phases, if you will. So if you're thinking about wells in your schedule that you're drilling, you have like 3 types of wells. So the active wells, so wells that you're currently working on, they're either about to drill them. So when I say about to drill, it might be 6 months down the road, it might be a year down the road. But there are things that you're actively thinking of. They might have been drilled and they're waiting for frac. But in all of these things, there are people within the company either working land, working permits, working different pieces to get that well ready to go, whether that's ready to spud or ready to frac. There are the wells that you've completed. So those are recently done that you might want to go back and refer to. And then the wells there you've not started at all. So think a well that you're going to drill in 3 years where you're not really thinking about anything on it. It's in your inventory. You might have not properly characterized it, but those are the 3 different types of wells you have. You can store all of those in Greenlight. So what we have here is Matt showed that diagram, and so you have your well broken out into different phases, right? So you might say, hey, there are the wells that we're slowly, we're starting to think about, we're working them up. They're the wells that we're prepping to stake, they're the wells we're prepping to drill. And all of those things have different sets of tasks that fit into these phases. And so Greenlight allows you to visualize all that information. You can look at that information either in this card view or in a list view. You can sort this by well if you want. You can sort it by phase or by whatever activity detail that you want. Most people go look at this information in the card view. Now, if you're running a 3, 4, 5 rig program, this could start to get really busy. So we give you the ability to filter this down to look for whatever you want. So I can look for a specific group of wells. So in this case, I'm looking for the Nikki 2 pads. So I can search by well, or I can look for wells with activity in 2026 and filter down to that view. Or I can look for wells, in a specific area. So I want to look for wells in my Midland area, for example, and just filter that down to however I want to view this information. I can also color this by however I want to. So really just giving you tools to make this visually appealing and make this easy for anybody to see, so that person A might care about this stuff by plant, so he can visualize this stuff by plant. Person B might care about this stuff by area. Person C might care about this stuff by, they might want to see it by milestone, or they might want to see it by rig, for example. So what resource am I using to drill this? We give you the flexibility to do all of these things however you want to view it. I'm going to go back to viewing mine by area, and then I'm going to sort this by spud date. So I'm visualizing all this stuff by spud date. As I hover over all of these, you'll notice that, first of all, as you're looking at all of these, I have different categories. Matt alluded to this when he showed that diagram. And so within a company, there are different people who have to do different tasks. And what we found with planning is, the planner is oftentimes chasing, all the different individual pieces to get all of that into an Excel spreadsheet to find out that everything is ready to do. And so, but really what we want to do is democratize that process and pass that information back down to the users, so that rather than spending time in a meeting and, having to take all those statuses or having information live in different people's heads, all of that stuff can be done during the week as the process goes by, and then the next person in the process can start doing it. So if it's a process that occurs in parallel, I can do step A, like maybe permits, and then the next person in the process can start working on their pieces as well. And so what you'll notice visualizing this is that if I look at one of the pads, for example, I can see that, if I'm looking at one of the state prep pads, there's in that phase, there's land, regulatory, drilling, facilities, and filled up involved in that process. Now, those are the people involved in the process. But if I hover over this, there's a list of tasks that tie into these processes, right? So land might have 2 tasks, environmental might have 3 tasks, but I can either visualize this at this rolled up level. So here, if I'm looking at that cherry C pad, I can see that the drilling is done, but facilities, land, regulatory, etc., have different processes that they're still working on. And I can hover over it and see what the actual individual task detail is to be done. So how does this get set up? Just to give it a little bit of context, I'm going to hop over to the settings and talk about how I'm defining this. So as at the company level, most people will have a series of steps or milestones that they, or phases, if you will, that they use to define their processes. So in our case, we have about 5 different tasks that we're going from, not start at all the way to when a well is ready to frack. We make this really flexible. So what you want to define your start stage and what you want to define your end stage is really up to you. So you can define all of these individual pieces and say, okay, well, in that, we do a bunch of things, and then that well is proposed, and we do a few more things, and then that well is ready to stake, ready to build, etc. All of these are flexible. You can have as many or as few as you want. Most people that we've seen have somewhere between 4 and 8, but really, it's really up to you as a company to define what you want this to look like. And then after you define these milestones, you can then define these workflows. And so for the workflows, it's really just what is the step, what category, like so on a RACI chart, who owns this piece, and then what milestone does it fall under. Now, that information can be, so you define that. And then also, who owns this step. So you can have a default assignee. So there's a person who does the step, and then that goes through. As you can see, not all these steps are, individual point steps. So something like facilities design, you might start talking about early, but it might persist through the course of the well. So you might be talking about this early in the life because you're designing the facility, but you really don't need it till much later. So you can actually, step through the short-term critical steps, and then that facility design step just kind of flows through all the phases till it gets to a point where I have to get this done before this well is ready to frack or ready to come online, depending on how I've defined my activities. All right. So going back to the task board, after looking at that, this is really busy. What I can do is I can filter this down to maybe the neighbor's rig and take a look at that. So we'll go look at the neighbor's rig, having drilled or where drilled by this rig. Let's go look at the Cherry C pad. Now, clicking on this, all of my data is consolidated at the pad level. However, I can look at this information either at the pad level, so in this cherry C pad, or just go look at individual information at a well level. So I can either say a well is completed, or I can actually say, or I actually do it at the pad level. Ideally, though, what we want is that the person who owns this task, so who this task is assigned to, that person is the person updating this task and saying that the task is done. So in this case, we're in the stake prep phase and looking at Josh's notes from earlier. The title is effectively done. This is waiting on signature. There are going to be those instances where a thing is almost quite done, but we're not quite ready to mark that as completed. What we can do in that case is take this pad from stake prep and just move it to the build prep phase. So override the derived task information, because it's all, as we dealing in this industry, it's all caveats, right? It's like, step A goes before step B 95% of the time, but that 5% of the time we want the flexibility to make those changes. And so what I'm going to do is go here and override this status and move it from stake prep to build prep, even though this title isn't done. So I'm going to override this phase and then just move that to the build prep phase and save that. And so now that is now in the build prep phase, and we can then start talking about the next steps in the process. I can go look at other pads and see what information is in there, and this note record becomes a live view that anybody that has access to the system can look and get context on the pad. So as I move things around, I can go look. I'm on this cherry C pad. I'm looking to see exactly what's done. And this is a multi-user program, so we want everybody to be able to be in it at the same time. We really want to democratize this process so that's not just one person who is chasing everybody to do that. So as you'll notice, Leslie's completed the drill plan. So the drill plan is done. So we've moved from build prep to drill prep. So Leslie completed the drill plan. Thanks, Leslie. And if for some reason we realize that, hey, actually Leslie completed the drill plan on 6 wells, she wasn't able to do it on the 7th, I can go to, on 5 wells, wasn't able to do it on 6th, I can go to that cherry C pad and I can uncheck that on that pad, on that well. And what you'll notice is now we're back in the drill prep phase because Leslie, there we go. Yeah, so we're back in this phase. So depending on how you move things around, you can actually move wells back and forth between phases. And I can say, hey, this wasn't started, or this is in progress. Or if I say this is completed, then that moves me to the next phase. And this note view becomes like a source of record that I can go back and refer to. And we're not just having comments in meetings and there's no way to track this information. All right, and then stepping through and going through wells, I can go look at a different pad. I can see that here we're not at drill checkoff yet, so we might be sitting in the meeting talking through. We're having some issue with frac water apparently. Eric is refusing to source frac water, so probably need to go talk to Eric. But we sit down and talk through these pieces and see exactly what's going on with. All of these, as I mentioned, is rolled up by the pad level. It's extremely easy to move things back and forth between pads. So if I, for example, had wells on the cherry A, and I said, hey, look, we're doing a DSU blitz. We have 2 different sets of pads, but we have a 6-well pad here with this cherry A pad and a 3-well pad with this cherry C pad. And then I say, actually, what we want to do is, as we're planning this, we decide to move this cherry A to the cherry C. I can very easily do that and take this and stick this on. And so now this is now a 5-well pad. This is a 4-well pad. So all of it is pretty instantaneous. All of it is extremely responsive. It's really easy to do the work. And I'm going to go ahead and stick that 6 back on that pad, on that original pad. And so that's done. And so all of that information is at the well level, but then at the pad level, we're aggregating that information so you can see exactly what's going on as well. And so, yeah, so that's how this goes. You get the ability to make all these changes, really store this information, and anybody that has access to the tool can come in and see what's going on, really what do I need to be working on, what are the tasks. Something to point out is each of these tasks is assigned to a different person. So or, assigned to specific people. So only those people or admins can make the tasks. What we don't want is, the regulatory guy changing the reservoir engineering task or vice versa. So you get to define all these individual tasks and see exactly what's going on there. And so going back to my settings, I talked a little bit about, we can bring in all these attributes and information from other tools. So, I might have the area. So hopping over, I just saw Trey's question. So are the owners of the tasks sent email notifications of tasks that either need to be completed or signed off on? So not yet, Trey. So what we wanted to do first was build the workflow piece. But the notifications piece and all that is definitely within scope. That's probably something we intend to tackle later on this year. We're still having conversations and really would like to talk to you more about it. It's, do we want this to be like a digest that occurs once a week, or do we want this to be just, as the stuff goes out? We're still trying to make conversations about that, but that's definitely something that's within scope.
Yeah, and I'll hop in on that one a little bit. Like Barry said, we wanted to get the core of the core functionality released and out there as soon as it was ready, and so that's been the case. Though we've been working this for a couple of years, it's in productive use, by the company that sponsored the development of it. Things like notifications and some of the other workflow, like individual productivity features, we've got our eyes on, and we've got some designs kind of in the works for. Some different views to help pull things to the front for individuals as well, right? Like the first priority was getting the highest priority stuff in for the team, and for the whole schedule front and center, so that everybody could see it and start having accountability that way. And then after that comes more of the individual productivity and some of the other things.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah. Because as Matt said, something we really want to solve is, if I'm, a person working the land permits, I have like 4 or 5 things I could work on. What's the most important thing that I can be working on? And we intend to have this tool be the tool that helps people answer that question. All right. So really the core thing, something to note is, this product works in concert with your planning tool, right? So hopping over to a tool like Planner, there's information there with asset dates and things like that. So all of the asset dates are feeding from Planner back to Greenlight. And we've made Greenlight a standalone tool. So, it integrating directly with Planner, yes. But if you're not a Planner user and you just want to use Greenlight by itself, we also support that use as well. So things like dates are going to come from your planning tool. Things like attributes that might come from your data warehouse or wherever you have that. And really what you want to do is, as I look at this and I say, hey, this thing is not quite ready to drill, what can be done to move, to either like accelerate the stuff to be ready to drill, or is there something else we can move into the process? And so the thought is that like this then pulls in data from your different sources of record. So whether it's the attributes you're pulling in, whatever information you decide to bring in, whether it's dates from your planning tool, and then this then owns the whole workflow process for all the pre-spot activities. And then it's feeding that information back to your planning tool, which then informs your short-term execution, right? So, hey, we've decided to push this well back because we want to get some more information on offset wells. What can we pull in? Well, let's go take a look at all of this. We're pushing all this information back, and we can see that, hey, here are 2 wells that are ready to drill. Okay, those are wells that we can pull in. And so that then changes the dates, the dates, the spud dates and the frac dates for those wells. That information comes back, and this then becomes like a continuous loop that, both things feed each other. Can you have multiple workflows for different assets or areas? We'll get to that in just a second. Short answer, yes. So you can define milestones. So going back to your settings, let's talk a little bit about that. So you can define your milestones. So for one asset, for a specific asset, you can have one milestone. You can have different assets. So I could have a Permian area and an Eagle Ford area, and my milestones can vary by team. So if I have a Permian team that has one set of milestones, I can have an Eagle Ford team with a completely different set of milestones. And so those can vary. But for workflows, I can have several different workflows. So I can have one workflow, in this case, that's for my Texas business unit. I might have a secondary workflow that's just for SWD. So if I have a well that's, that's a producing well, maybe it's using this workflow. If I have a well that's an SWD, it has a slightly different workflow that might have some additional steps and doesn't have some of these steps as well. Talking about the workflow, I touched on this a little bit earlier. I can, click on a specific step. So in this case, acreage review, I can see that this is owned in this case by geology. This is the milestone it lives under. And then these are the relationships to it. So it starts after location selection and finishes before preliminary FE. So you can have that, or you can have a default assignee. We can also have steps like, in this case, permits, where similar steps, it extends between two phases. But what you can also have under this are sub-steps. And so, for example, in the permit world, if I go talk to the permit person, they might have several different, permits that they have to do. Some of them, in this case, I might need BLM permits or FAA permits or things like that. I can have all of those things as sub-steps underneath the larger step. That way I don't have to have this super complicated workflow. I can still have permits as an entire thing. And then I can have all these sub-steps that I can then check off. And what you'll notice is, going back in my settings, which I'll show in a second, I can actually check off these sub-steps, or the user can check off these sub-steps as well. And then just touching a little bit more, I touched on teams. So you can have different teams. We don't really have a limit of teams that can exist across the company. And then you can have accounts. And so for every single person, you can have a category that person belongs to and what teams they have access to. And so if I go back here, looking at just, clicking on a specific pad, the only people that can change this drill plan are either administrators or people on the drill team. And so we've really limited it so that, what you want is that, you don't want everybody being able to do everything. You want to be able to create some sort of structure there. So you then have, the surface line people only being able to change the surface line tasks, as well as the admin, so that we can still, make these changes in the meeting. But also these things can happen outside of the meeting by the actual individuals that need to use it. Security. Oh yeah. So Trevor, I hadn't actually seen your question, but that's exactly it. So only the people. So you'll notice that under every step. So there are only 5 people effectively that can make a change to the drill plan step. And if I go look at GeoProg, there are only 3 people, because only these people are tagged to have access to the geo step. And so as you look at every single thing, there are only going to be a limited number of people, and only the people that are assigned to this product, so effectively the people on this team, are the only ones that can make changes on the process. All right. So that's
Barry, did you see the other question there about, can you set deadlines for tasks?
Can you set deadlines for tasks? Not yet. So as Matt mentioned, kind of going back to Matt's prior point, the workflow piece was, what we thought was the core problem. What we're going to next is the ability to set deadlines for tasks. So all of these tasks, what we think is key is the ability to define a duration for this task and be able to calculate critical dates on all of these tasks. So the next thing we're going to do is add durations to all these pieces, because what we want to be able to do is actually define deadlines for the milestone. So we're not going to do it at task level. We're going to solve it at the milestone level, and then calculate critical timing to get to each of those milestones. So if, for example, I say that the ready to build step has to be done 2 weeks before the pad is ready to build, well, we're then calculating the durations for each individual well pad to get to that. And so what then happens is you then say, well, actually, based on the calculations, this is not going to be done 2 weeks before. We'll then flag that as a warning to tell you, hey, this is not done. So that's something we're actively working on now. So stay tuned.
Yeah, and something to add to that, the difference between scheduling pre-spud work and scheduling the actual development work, like the two Gantt charts might look exactly the same, but like the way that the steps move and squish and change and the way that those things are managed are way, way, way different. And so I think we want to be really intentional about not just jamming the planner scheduler into this or vice versa, and making sure that the way that the thing actually functions will speed people up, because we've seen people take the development planning or development scheduling approach and try to use those tools for pre-spud stuff, and it just causes a whole lot of problems. And so we want to do it right and get the nuances of what scheduling this kind of work actually looks like.
Right. And so, I mean, just to wrap this up, I think one of the things when we started, looking at this process was, before we went and talked to 80 different people, was why is this a problem, right? And why can't you solve this in Excel? And so we really wanted this to be a tool that kind of like Trevor is saying, actually have like security and permissions and auditability, but we also wanted to build a tool that was easy to use and adopt, and that was very flexible. And so we think we believe we've done that. It's an extremely flexible tool to use. We wanted to prevent information silos. I cannot count the number of hallway conversations I had where I had to go talk to a person about a well, and if I hadn't run to that person, then I don't know, that we might have had issues on the well, and it might have had to work like extra hours later because it's a conversation living in people's heads. And so we really wanted to get this into a tool where all this information lives, where if you leave for a week, there's a place to come back to and actually step through all this information and see exactly what has happened during your absence. And so really, and then as well as just reduce the roadblocks for the pre-spud process. All right.
Yeah, and I think the other part about that is the way that things are done right now in so many cases is very verbal. So in weekly meetings, there's status updates that are kind of flying around, and if you're not checking the correct OneNote link or the right spreadsheet or things like the communication gets just trapped. And so having this as the place where communication happens, like integrating the place where data is captured with the communication, is really, really powerful. And so it's not an additional step to, after you go have that meeting, go check your boxes and click on everything. It facilitates it. So if the data is not here, then it didn't happen. And that way, the time that people spend together, then that they can actually talk about de-risking stuff or opportunities or solving problems, like the things that they should be spending time on, not nagging a landman to do the thing that they were supposed to do a month ago.
Yeah.
All right. We've got a couple other questions that people asked around how many people can use it at once. Is it a desktop tool? That kind of stuff. Those can probably be answered in one. You want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So it's a desktop tool, but there's a web-based component to it. So it's fully, we have a desktop application, but it's really just a web-based tool. So that it's AWS in the background and right into that. So you can have multiple. We don't know what that number is yet. It's something north of 100 people simultaneously. I'll let Josh correct me if I'm wrong, but there's effectively no limit to the number of people that can make changes at the same time or write to it at the same time.
So Josh, is the limit 8 billion people then?
Yeah, it's going to be very high, and obviously we'll keep scaling it as we get more and more companies in the tool. But yeah, we're not worried about that.
Yeah.
Something to point out is, I talked about the different teams. So I have different sets of wells in different teams, and depending on what security settings I want to do. So I have an Eagle Ford well that has barely any pads, and so I can have different sets of users completely attached to this. So I can have an Eagle Ford geologist and a Permian geologist, and if those are separate people, then they only have access to their own workspaces. If that's the same person, then that person has the ability to swap between different views and actually see Eagle Ford wells and work on those, or see Permian wells and work on those, and so information if they want to. And as you'll notice, these are, we just have milestones that exist at the company level. We can have those be the same milestones, but there's that flexibility there where those can be a different set of milestones if you want to.
All right.
If a
Another
company
one-
has fairly
Yeah.
has a fairly well-defined work process, how long does this software take to implement? So I'll say days. It's relatively the most difficult thing I found in the implementation they've done is really coming up with this view and understanding what this looks like. And I think most companies understand this to a certain degree, but I think what we found is as people start building this thing out, this generates a whole lot of conversation. And so apart from that, so this is the difficult part, and this is difficult really as like conceptual discussions of what goes before what. But once this gets done, I mean, bringing wells in, updating that information, that's all automated. So that part is an hour, maybe. I'll be conservative, but we're talking days, not weeks to months to get set up.
Maybe expand on from there, talk about costs too, like ballparks, probably.
I'll let you do that, Matt.
Yeah. So in short, so we don't charge for implementation. This is a new tool. And so if it proves that, change management is a lot bigger problem than it seems like it will be, and some of those things, then there might be something there. But as far as implementation and support, we don't charge for those things. And this is you're going to have a lot more users than the planner in this. And so I'll have to pull up our sheet on like the per user costs, but smaller companies, in the call it 25 to 50K range, like per year. Big companies, it's going to scale up to, I don't know, a couple 100,000, like for at the very top end per year. And that's all in, right? That's all the software, the setup, all the users you want, all those sorts of things. Now that's early access pricing, right? So it could change over the years, and we'll see where it goes and what the value of $1 is in a few years and all that. But that's kind of what the ballparks that we're thinking about now. And so segue from there into like where the tool is. Like I said, we've been working on this for a couple of years now. I've taken it really far, and so it's in productive use by the company that sponsored it. We're looking for a couple of more companies to further test it. The case that we've got right now is a really good situation where they have a bunch of different assets, but not a ton of operations, like not a ton of activity in any one. So it really kind of stretched it as far as making sure that it's adaptive across different types of business units with different templates and things like that. So a company with a lot more assets, even if it's just a single asset or company, I think that'll be another good way to push it and help it expand and things like that. But a couple more early access spots to just stretch it in a couple of different ways and push it from there. But as far as the core functionality that's released there, it's proven and productive in productive use.
Yeah. And as Matt mentioned in the early phase, in his early comments, we started off with a pre-spud process and really focused on well readiness. But just this kind of series of activities, we think this also applies to things like abandonment in certain states or even pipeline build in certain states. So I think long term, that's places we intend to take it. But we felt that the pre-spud process was the one that had kind of like the most wood to chop and the thing where most people saw issues where they had to fix. And so that's where we've started. We're pretty excited about the tool. We think we've accomplished our goal of having it being an easy to use tool and easy to adopt tool. If you want to give it a spin, we'd love for you guys to take a look at it.
Yep, for sure. One other one maybe we touch on before we wrap up, integrations. Where do you see it fitting in the workflows, and like what tools does it make sense to integrate this with and what data?
Sure. So, obviously, as I mentioned, all of the activity data, so company data warehouse to pull in things like attributes and things like that. If things like, pad dates or dates live in there, pull in from there. directly. Otherwise, pulling from whatever system that exists in. Now it's our tool, right? So full on tight integration with the planner to both push and pull the data. Right on the initial phase, we've done an Excel integration, but we're actively working on the full tight integration so that will be there shortly. And then so it makes the most sense to integrate with things like sources of record and then also planning tools. So whatever you're using for your planning tool, I think that controls the dates. That's the source of record for the dates. And then wherever your company header data is stored. So we'll as we talk to clients, we'll see what makes sense and figure, we'll just, with our general philosophy of integration, we'll just, if something makes sense, we won't be the bottleneck to your data. If you want to get all these statuses out and pushed back into your system so you can visualize it elsewhere, we'll just do that as well. So, Snowflake, planning tools, and then anywhere else you want it to, really.
Yeah. Probably my favorite question: why can't I do this in Excel? Answer that.
You can. You absolutely can do this in Excel. It's just if you have, I don't know, quarter rig and a couple of wells a year, you absolutely can do this in Excel. You really can do this in Excel with even bigger rigs. It's just, it gets extremely complicated, and tracking who did what where, and conditional formatting on sheets, and just having Excel sheets break down. If you want to live in that world, then yes. But we have built a tool that's cheap enough to compete with Excel, but flexible enough to be way more useful than Excel is.
Yeah. Same reason we type with our hands and not bang our heads on the keyboard too. Well, I think that's all the comments that I see and questions that we've had sent over. I want to thank everybody for coming and for the questions and comments. We'd love to hear your feedback, like in any direction, whether you like it, you hate it, you think we never should have built it, or whatever. Like we'll take any and all feedback. If it's that bad, maybe do it privately to say where he goes. But no, we really appreciate the time. We really like building this stuff, with people in industry. That's why we talk to so many companies. That's the way we built the planner, and all the tools is collaboratively. We're trying to build the tools that people have been saying should exist for a long time, and so we're gonna keep trying to do that. And so if you know us, that if you want to chat about this stuff further, we're not going to be real high pressure or anything like that. And we'd love to hear more about your thoughts and how you see this problem needing to be solved. Barry, Josh, anything to throw in here at the end?
I got nothing. So happy to chat about this further. If you want to take a look at it in a more private setting, any of those. We really enjoyed building this tool, and we're pretty excited about where we're going to take it.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
This will be recorded, and so if there's anybody else that you think should see this demo and everything, feel free to share the link to the live. So the recorded video will be on there for as long as LinkedIn exists, probably.
Next year.
I'm sure we'll do another one once we take some more big steps and have some more stuff to show. But, all right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.